Hey everyone, it's Daniel here to talk about Wuthering Heights, the new film adaptation of Emily Bronte's classic story. The original novel is a masterful work of dramatic passion, so if you love the book, well, it actually won't really matter either way, because this adaptation is basically nothing like the book. Does the bold, sexually charged new modern direction pay off? Or does it end as badly as you might expect? I think you probably already know where we're heading, but I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So, as you may have noticed from the movie's posters, this new Wuthering Heights adaptation has set its title in quotation marks. And according from what I've seen to director Emerald Fennell, the creative decision is intended to signify that the adaptation is a loose retelling, kind of unburdened by any rigid faithfulness to the source material. And you know what, whatever, that's fine. But unfortunately, it also reflects just a complete removal of everything that makes Emily Bronte's novel a classic. If the film's trailers made you worry at all about the direction of this adaptation, then your intuition was probably correct. I think more 50 Shades of Bronte than a timeless tale. The new Wuthering Heights is an overly sexual, shallow, and I think vulgar adaptation that just lacks all the sophistication and compelling themes of its namesake. The film's music was provided by musical artist Charlie XCX, and perhaps surprisingly, I actually found it to be one of the film's few strengths. But the opening song begins with a voiceover that says, "If it's beauty, do you see beauty? If there's beauty, say it's enough." And I think that sentiment kind of perfectly captures the essence of this film, because Wuthering Heights is definitely a beautiful looking film. The cinematography has a striking and almost picturesque quality with some truly vivid and memorable visual imagery. For whatever its other faults, and there are many, it is a gorgeous movie to look at, but it quickly becomes evident that the beauty is not enough, and kind of beyond the surface of just the pretty visuals, there's just little else of redemptive value to be found here. And as any of my fellow book nerds know, Bronte's original novel was gritty and boundary pushing, at least for the 1800s, but for all the novel's explosive passion, there is no sex. Of course, that's partially a byproduct of the era, but I think also it's due to its exploration of more interesting psychological and moral themes. In contrast, this film adaptation feels like angsty fan fiction by some horny teenage girl. It seeks all of the passion of Bronte's novel, but just lacks the maturity or depth to explore it internally. Kind of the nuanced moral tension of the novel is completely abandoned and reduced to a story that's just all about physical attraction and lust and sex, where Catherine and Heathcliff are essentially just physical bodies for each other's sexual pleasure. And beyond just the sexual bombardment, Wuthering Heights also completely inverts the themes of the novel. There's a moment in the film where the plot of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet is recounted, and I think kind of the parallel drawn to literature's most famous star-crossed lovers exposes, I think, my central issue with this film. In Bronte's novel, Catherine and Heathcliff are largely the antithesis of Shakespeare's doomed lovers. Romeo and Juliet are pure hearts kept apart by external forces, whereas Bronte's doomed lovers are clearly a toxic pairing, kind of led by their own pride and base nature to resist the more refining external forces of their society. And where the story's tragedy is that they are repeatedly drawn together, not that they are kept apart by a prudish society. And to be totally clear, the problem is not merely that Wuthering Heights strays from its source material. All adaptations do that, even I think the good ones. The issue to me is that the significant changes in the thematic focus simply don't work as a compelling narrative, and they remove any sense of conflict or tension that this adaptation just desperately needs. Instead, Wuthering Heights becomes a sort of morality play without the morality, just an overly long slog of scenes depicting despicable people indulging in endless displays of sinful passion without remorse. I mean, at one point, Heathcliff literally has another woman who he has spitefully corrupted and defiled on all fours and chained around the neck like a dog. But then just several scenes later, audiences are seemingly asked to sympathize with him for his broken heart. And I think by making the book's villains as this film's quasi-heroes, the story just becomes a very jarring and disjointed experience. I'll mention too that the film's opening scene basically tells you exactly what you can expect. It features a public hanging that I think serves as a very aggressive showcase of this film's like impending vulgarity. There's a nun who like attempts to bring order to the crowd watching the hanging, but she is quickly like mocked and ignored as the crowd instead sort of indulges in their carnal passion and like sinful lusts of their heart. And even the character of Nellie, I think, has a similar fate here. She's not perfect, but like, in the novel at least, kind of filled with prideful and unlikable characters, she is arguably the one kind of voice of level-headed moral clarity, and she still kind of serves that role, at least to some degree, in the film, but she's also villainized at times, with her actions and that kind of wise moral counsel framed more as like self-serving or like born out of spite and jealousy. And at least to me, it just suggests that like when these sinful indulgences of the story are like celebrated rather than condemned, then the very few like voices of opposition just feel left out of place and like without a purpose in the film. And I think that may tell you all you need to know about this film. As far as content to consider, things on the surface of this, there is a lot. For language, there are several, maybe 5, 6 F words, as well as just a collection of other profanities. For violence, you see like a public hanging, like I mentioned. You also have several corpses depicted at various times, and even one character who like violently kicks one of the corpses in the face. And also, there's just sort of a frequent theme of just physical abuse, although it's mostly implied rather than being shown on screen. Also, women are not necessarily like shown to be unwilling participants in the film's various like sexual encounters, but the very like shockingly rough and like degrading acts done to them by men, and like the manipulative and like controlling manner that leads to those acts could, and I think probably should, be viewed as sexual abuse. And lastly, while not necessarily like violence, there is a miscarriage which results in just an obscene amount of blood to pour out of a woman's womb, although she's like covered by a white blanket, but the blood stains the fabric and like pools on the floor. As far as sexuality, as you might guess, there is a ton of it in this film. There is no actual like nudity depicted, but there are plenty of sexual acts that are depicted, and I don't necessarily want to go through all of them, but just to give you a sample, there is a man and a woman who have sex in a stable, with the man putting like a horse bridle on the woman, although like the sex itself is more heard than it is actually like shown. In other scenes, you have a woman who like is shown to pleasure herself, and then a man sucks on the fingers that she used in the act. You also have a man who tells another man that he is welcome to stay and watch as he has sex with his wife in a moment that I think is borderline like marital rape. And there are just plenty of other sex scenes that occur all throughout this film in various locations, including some while the woman is pregnant with another man's child. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface, if you've read the book, which I encourage you to do, because the book is definitely far better than this movie, but then you know that one of the most like iconic moments in the novel is when Catherine declares, "I am Heathcliff. He's always, always in my mind, not as a pleasure any more than I am always a pleasure to myself, but as my own being." And the film retains part of that speech, kind of about their two souls being one and the same. But I think like the dialogue that is being left out is pretty illuminating. And in the movie, Catherine remarks in some dialogue that is pretty closely adapted from the novel that she would actually be miserable in heaven because she would feel homesick. And the book actually kind of expands the idea further and establishes like that contrast more clearly, that her attraction to Heathcliff is not really about sexual passion at all. In the novel, Catherine imagines herself as being an angel, and Heathcliff is frequently kind of identified as being like a fiend or a devil. And so in a very like symbolic sense, Catherine is kind of being pulled between good and evil, between, you know, to be an angel or to be a devil. So her declaration, like, "I am Heathcliff," is more an admission of her own sinful nature and like kind of inner demons than it is like a romantic yearning for some monstrous man. It's a very twisted romance, but one that is like recognized as being twisted and distorted. In contrast, this film reflects more, I think, modern sensibilities that elevate romantic passion and like sexual freedom at all costs. Kind of what is twisted suddenly becomes desirable, and the characters are soulmates, although in the film at least, seemingly only because they have enjoyable sex. And so it suggests that like, they should be together, societal norms and like, expectations or not. I think what was shocking in 1847 when the novel was published is no longer shocking today, with like the extra, marital affair framed as something exciting and satisfying. And the eventual like misfortune that does befall these characters is not in like the taboo sexual passion or like the broken relationships that it causes, but just in the bad luck and like, conservative society expectations that make the affair necessary to begin with. The film suggests that if only they had been able to pursue their passions without consequence, they could have been happy. And the Bible famously cautions in Isaiah 5:20, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." And there is a fleeting moment right at the end of this film where Catherine does appear, at least for a moment, to regret her sin, acknowledging that she might have degraded herself, but the film just can't seem to dwell on that possibility for long. So, in the end, I think Wuthering Heights falls short as both an adaptation of a classic and just as a compelling romantic drama in its own right. There is, I think, a hypothetical version of this adaptation that I think could succeed as a beautiful period piece, boasting excellent set design and costuming, star power in Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, and just the foundation of one of literature's most unique explorations of romance and passion. But sadly, in continuation of what I think is one of Hollywood's most frustrating and arrogant trends, the classic tale is suffocated under the weight of shallow modern sensibilities. I think whether you have read the source material or not, the film offers as little of anything other than an opportunity for audiences to degrade themselves, like the story's doomed lovers, in an overindulgence of taboo sexuality. It may be a pretty looking film, but neither the characters nor the film itself seem to realize that true beauty is more than just skin deep. But hey, I would love to hear what you think. I don't recommend going to see this film, but if you do, don't be shy, jump into the comment section, let's have a conversation on it. If you haven't done so, I encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a Collider. Got lots of other movie reviews, got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast, I got interviews, just other fun stuff. Would love to have you guys be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching, stay safe, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.